This is a good level. Great. I have one word written on my card. The word is terror. I want to tell you, I am delighted that you invited me here this week. We have cactus in Taos. We have mountains in Taos. We have the occasional beautiful golden cottonwood tree in Taos. We don't have sugar maples. It's a serious lack. And I drove in from the airport today, and I kept saying, "Stop! Look at this, Jane! Look at that!" I was pointing to trees. So it feels very festive to be here. And for myself, it's a little bit like a long artist date to get to soak in a set of new visuals, which I hope to employ to great good effect. Yesterday, after what I would call about a 15-year pause, an old novel of mine suddenly became doable. The characters started chatting again. I have learned that when they do that, you should reach for a pen and take dictation. And so in that sense, it's a very happy time for me to be here, because I got a phone call last week from the publisher of The Artist's Way, who knows that I'm very close to my father. And he said, "Well, you could call your dad and tell him that he has a best-selling daughter." I thought, my father is very old-fashioned. He will not want to hear he has a best-selling daughter. I should probably say something like, "Dad, your daughter has a best-selling book." But I want to talk a lot tonight about fear, or as I put it, terror. And one of the terrors that I have to look in the face a little bit are things like, last week I was talking to a fellow who had called up to do a radio interview, and he said something like, "Well, I know you've written 4 plays, and I know you've sold 9 movies, and I know you've directed a feature film, but your real accomplishment is writing The Artist's Way." And I said, "Thank you. That makes me feel like the Masters and Johnson of creativity. And which would you rather do? Teach people how to do it, or get to do it yourself?" You know? And so one of my particular little terrors is that I would ever have to choose between the 2 paths of either teaching or doing. And frankly, I doubt if that's ever going to happen. The truth is, and I want to talk about this a little bit, I think we have some teachers in the audience, and I think that one of the many myths that is very damaging in academia, and which sours our student attitude and our attitude when we are faculty, is the idea that those that can't do teach, right? I know this is just the kind of, give it to them in the neck comment that is sort of fun to do when you get a rotten assignment. But the truth is that artists have always apprenticed other artists, and that creative people have always apprenticed other creative people, and that one of the strange things that happens as you get further along on your own creative path is that you find yourself being nice to exactly the kind of obnoxious young person that you were. And I want to be clear that I was an extremely obnoxious young person, unlike anyone else, I'm sure. One of my credits is that I wrote for the Washington Post. I want to tell you a little bit about how that came to pass, because one of the myths that we have around creativity is that it's a very small insiders club that exists somewhere, and if you don't know how to get in there because your father owns the paper, or your mother's family has a publishing empire, or you're best friends with the guy who runs the Met, then why bother to do your creativity at all? Because consider the odds. Okay? The question, consider the odds, is an excellent way to not do a piece of work. Okay? And most of us get acquainted with this question very early. And I'd like to see if this sounds familiar to any of you. You say something like, I think I'm going to write a novel. I have this idea. And your friend says to you, wow, do you know what the odds are of ever publishing a novel? Okay. Or you say to your parents, I think I want to be an artist. I know you want me to be a lawyer. I understand this. I know I should be taking over the farm. There are many things that are more important for me to be doing, but I like to paint. And what they say is, honey, maybe you should try to find something that you could fall back on, right? You could always teach, right? So it's a privilege to be talking in an academic situation, because there are few situations in America more dangerous to creativity. In an ideal world, we would broach our plans to our parents. We would say, I want to grow up to make movies. And they would say, we could get a Super 8 camera. You could probably do one of those moving shots by sitting on the back of the tractor, you know. And that isn't what happens. We say, I think I want to be an artist, and they say, and pay the rent. Artists aren't very happy, okay? So we start with that kind of backgrounding when we're just little buns, and then we get into academic situations where many times our teachers are extremely creative people who have had the same kind of conditioning. And so here we are all gathered together in a situation which could be festive and enjoyable, and instead often becomes a situation where we reinforce each other's sense of limits. We agree upon a certain ceiling of accomplishment, and we don't push the envelope too much. So some of what I probably should have asked them to put a little warning on the bottom of whatever they passed around campus that said, danger, this lecture will not be a lecture, it will actually be somewhat interactive. Because I truly hate lecturing. I came here tonight really to talk artist to artist with people. It's my belief that, and actually I want to say, it's not just my belief, it is my experience. It is my experience that the interesting question to ask yourself is not, what if I unblock myself and I do rotten work? Okay, has anybody had that fear? So I get really unblocked and I put 2 years into it and it just stinks, right? And then even worse, I'm the only one who doesn't know this, right? And against all odds, it does get published, right? And then I have a page 1 New York Times Sunday section review about how rotten I am, right? Does any of this sound at all familiar? The more interesting question is not, will my work be bad? The real question is, what if I am truly gifted? What if I'm truly gifted and I don't have the courage in this life to express those gifts? I have taught this, I've been a writer for 25 years, and the tools in my book were tools that came from blood, sweat, tears, seat of the pants, a great deal of artistic pain, and wanting to pass along tools that I found worked in terms of healing up the kind of dings that people in a creative, I don't even want to say career, people with any creative trajectory, because I want to immediately divorce the idea of career from creativity, okay? America is an extremely product-oriented society. When someone says, I've just written a novel, we don't say, that is fantastic. We say, do you have a publisher? Okay? We don't tend to support each other for our process. We tend to only support each other in terms of product. William Kennedy, the fellow who wrote Iron Legs, he and I used to share a literary agent, and so I know this from the horse's mouth. There were 49 submissions on that book before it was accepted. He is now considered a great writer. Well, he was a great writer during all 49 of those submissions, okay? It didn't make him suddenly like, presto, Bill, you're now a great writer. Someone is publishing you. So part of what we need to do in order to detox from some pretty firmly entrenched American ideas around creativity is start to separate out career from creativity, start to separate out process and product, start to pull our self-respect back into a more interesting question, which is, did I do any today? Did I do any today? And this brings us squarely up to the idea of fear. One of the things that I notice when I teach is that people have an incredible amount of fear and shame around their creativity. And to be really accurate, they have a lot of shame around not having done it. And I want to talk a little bit about why that happens, okay? In America, we have a concept that there's such a thing as a real artist, okay? I want us to would you guys take one of those white cards, and if you don't have one, steal one from your neighbor or someone close. And if you can't find a card, do it on a sheet of paper if you brought one. And I want us to do just a little bit of free associating here, and we're going to take a look at the group mind and see what we think about artists, okay? So I'm going to go very quickly because in much the same way that before they were a Class A drug, amphetamines were a common study aid, and in much the same way that having a deadline in a class can allow you to finally hurtle past your fear, right? The night before, you've got to write this paper. Speed writing does the same thing, and so I know it's very annoying, but please fill in the blank. Ready? Artists are, okay? 1, artists are, first word that comes to mind. 2, artists are. 3, artists are. 4, artists are. 5, artists are. I hope you're all doing this. 6, otherwise it's going to just be dumb. 7, artists are. 8, artists are. 9, artists are. 10, artists are. Okay, flip that card over, please. Ready? We're doing this again, except this time, real artists are. All right, number 1, real artists are. Number 2, real artists are. Number 3, Yes. Real artists are. 4. Real artists are. 5. Real artists are. 6. Real artists are. I have great peripheral vision. Do you guys need cards? 7. Pens. To the front row. Real artists are. Where am I? Number 7? 7 or 8? 8. Real artists are. 9. Real artists are. 10. Real artists are. Okay, so let's take a look at what we think real artists are. Okay, could I please hear one list all the way through? And I'm just going to be ruthless and ask you right in the front row with the headband. Could you just do? Aha! She did not have a pen. Okay, can I have a volunteer? Someone who had a pen. Go. All right, real artists are, one more time, beautiful, ambiguous, androgynous, divine, sweet, me, us, and green. Okay, I want you to watch a little bit the way this works, because it's a pretty interesting thing. If you have a belief system that says real artists are good, okay, that's fine, except on the days when you don't think you're good. Okay, then you're not a real artist. Could I hear another list of our real artists? No, yes, go.
Disciplined, conscientious, accomplished, on time, productive, deep, sullen, wonderful, difficult to live with, annoying, gracious, and contributing to the end.
All right, let's hear this one more time. One more time. Disciplined.
Conscientious,
You guys write them down. Disciplined, conscientious, go.
accomplished,
Accomplished,
on time,
on time. Good.
productive,
Productive,
deep,
deep,
sullen,
sullen,
wonderful,
wonderful,
difficult to live with,
difficult to live with,
annoying,
annoying,
gracious,
gracious,
and contributing to humanity.
and contributing to humanity. Okay, I want to talk. Had no one put down they wear black? Right? They wear black. Real artists wear black. Real artists are born, not made. How many people have a belief system that says real artists are born that way? Okay, I want to take a look at this for a second. How many people have a belief system that says real artists are so disciplined, okay, that they would kill anyone who really got in their way? Okay? Okay? How many people have a belief system that says real artists have commitment instead of doubt? Could we do the hands in that? Okay. So please, all right, will you guys turn around and look? Let's put the hands up about real artists do not have doubt. Okay. Okay, let's listen for a second to the artists' lists. Let's just I'm going to write some of these words down. So I'm going to ask you, I know this is going to be a little bit like popcorn, but could you just give me a couple of words and go a little slow? Real artists, or artists are crazy. Thank you. Crazy, eccentric, broke. What else? I'm sorry? Oh, Famous when dead, and aren't we supposed to have how they get that way? Alcoholic, drug-riddled? I mean, no one believes that? Or does that fall under crazy? Go ahead. Small. Petty, you mean? Or small stature? Shorter than I am. I'm sorry? What? I can't hear you.
Bell-bottoms and flowers, I think.
Bell-bottoms and flowers? Does that mean flaky? Is this the quiet side of the room over here? Artists are optimistic.
Wild. Wacko.
Unrealistic. Emotional. Do we hear the word emotional? Okay, I just wanted you to take a quick look at this, because until you make some of these things conscious, what happens is that they get in between you and the work. So please go to another card, okay? We're gonna play just a little bit more with a couple of these concepts, namely the following. I can't be a brilliant, prolific artist because, one. Number two, I can't be a brilliant, prolific artist because, okay. Three, I can't be a brilliant, prolific artist because. Four, I can't be a brilliant, prolific artist because. Five, I can't be a brilliant, prolific artist because. Six, and because. Seven, I can't be a brilliant, prolific artist because. Eight, I can't be a brilliant, prolific artist because. 9, I can't be a brilliant, prolific artist because I can't write this fast. 10, I haven't thought of a thing to say. I can't be a brilliant, prolific artist because. Okay. What we're working with here is something called blurts. And those of you who have worked a little bit with the book know that I like to work with something that in New Age parlance is called affirmations. I, however, like to use them for something a little bit different than spiritual sit-ups. I like to use them in order to get you to hear what your blurts are. And one of the ways this works is you write a sentence, like I know that there are a number of people in this room who are multiply gifted and are going eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and if someone would remember to remind me to talk a little bit about the way we use dilettante as a slur in this country, I want to do that later. But for right now, just pick one of the things that you're interested in, okay? Like, I, Julia, am a brilliant and prolific director. I want you to, this is like going back to grammar school, but we're gonna write this sentence 5 times. What you're gonna do is listen for the blurt, okay? So if you say, I, Colleen, am a brilliant and prolific actress, this alien creature, remember how many of you guys have seen the first Alien? You know, where the creature suddenly comes up like, "Arr!" This is what these blurts do when you work with affirmations, okay? So please take the sentence, I, then your name, am a brilliant and prolific. Write it 5 times. Jot down your blurts so we get a sense of what they are. They're really evil, okay? So, I am a brilliant and prolific blank. It's a terrible angle to shoot up at a girl. It doesn't bother me if you stand. Okay, are we on about 3, 4, 5? Okay, I want us to take a look at what some of these blurts are. So just pretend this is Oprah, you guys, and sort of stand up and tell the video camera what horrible thing your subconscious said. Could I please hear a blurt? First, let me hear what sentence you were working with. How about somebody over here from the wing? Yes, with the black hair and the white shirt. Could you give us your sentence?
Fear incarnate. I get the mark for a brilliant and prolific writer, and my blurt is I don't have the time.
I don't have the time. Thank you. You can't read it, but it says time and money. Believe that that says time and money. Deborah, can you give me another blurt that came after that, please?
I don't have the right computer.
I don't have the right computer. Could I have a show of hands here on how many people know that they can't be a writer because they can't spell? Could I have the non-spellers and the non-punctuators? Could we see a show of hands here? Okay. Okay, yes, as the fellow to my right said, this is why Goddess invented spell check, right? Okay, so one of the things that we find out by working with these blurts is the irrational nature of a block, okay? It's my belief system, that we are all creative. I know this from very first-hand experience. I had a lady come to me before I was teaching a 12-week course, and she was in her mid-50s, and she came up to me at the end of the first class and said to me, Julia, have you ever had anybody go crazy from doing this work? And I looked at her and I thought, well, there's always a first time. And I said, if you are feeling shaky about this, let's make this commitment. If you get too scared, you'll go get a therapist and walk through this with additional support. And she said, okay. So she began doing morning pages. She said to me that night before she left, I'm 55, I have always wanted to be a writer. I have always been terrified to write. What happened was that in the third week of doing morning pages, she came to class with her first short story, which was about incest. And what had happened was that she had very correctly intuited that if she began writing, things which she had blocked would move up for her. So she kept her end of the bargain, which is she went and did therapeutic work, did incest recovery work. What happened from my perspective was that here was a 55-year-old woman who had never been able to write, and for the next 2.5 years, it felt like occasionally every week. I would open the mailbox on my little yellow coach house in Chicago, and there would be another little note from Thelma. I won another playwriting contest. And since I'm also a playwright, I would say to my then partner, she won another playwriting contest. You know, because we're all spiritual midgets some of the time, some of us a lot of the time. And what was interesting to me about this story was that she had for 5.5 decades not trusted her creativity, not tapped her creativity, told herself that she was too old, used work, which she was very good at, but used work to take away her time so that she didn't have enough time to do her creativity. And she told herself the kind of things that many of us do. We say things like, well, you know, if I had enough time, I would write a novel, I would paint. If I had enough money, if someone gave me $1 million, I would go write a novel. And it's very interesting to look at what this really means, okay? This is America, right? When we talk about, if I had $1 million, the real fantasy there is, if I were already respected, because in this country we both deplore, scorn, and respect the rich, right? So if I had enough money to feel protected from public opinion, which translates, gee, if I were just brave enough and just felt safe enough, I'd let myself write a book. Okay? Another thing that we believe is that in order to be an artist, you have to take a small nuclear bomb and insert it in your life as it currently exists. Okay? And if you don't believe me, just take a look at the reason I can't be. You did those little lists? The reason I can't be. And on some of your lists, it will be things like, I can't be an actor, I'll have to move to Los Angeles immediately. I can't stay married and write this novel. Okay? What we do is set up a system of price tags that strike us as too expensive to pay. If you are straight and you work with this, it'll tell you things like, well, okay, but you have to be gay in order to do that. If you are a gay artist, one of the things that will come up as a fear is, I am going to be struck straight. You know, so what happens is, it depends on what your area of vulnerability is, but what you need to know is that that the censor, who is the person who says this rotten stuff, the censor is essentially a schoolyard bully, okay? And what it boils down to is that the censor will always attack you in terms of your own personal Achilles heel. The first time that I did, I, Julia, am a brilliant and prolific writer, I got back, well, that means you're gay. I was straight. That means no man will ever love you. You'll be alone the rest of your life. Okay? Let's see. Nobody will ever respect you for your work, I think was the third one that came up. But I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, what? This is irrational. Where did this come from? And, then I thought, well, obviously it came from my mother, Dorothy. So, who was a very creative and also a very blocked woman. And a frightened woman who had a very hard time believing that you could move safely into your creativity. And for her daughters, she had a hard time believing you could move safely through life unless you did have, one of those wonderful guardian men around you keeping you safe. So I had really taken in my mother's belief system, and a lot of us do that, for better or for worse. I also took in her belief system that words were tremendously important, that poetry was worth writing, that it was important for every household to have at least one piano. So there were good things going on. But what I would like you to do now on yet another tiny scrap of paper is, I'm just going to take a look here. Oh my God. It's 9 o'clock. How are you holding up? Do you need to stand up and wiggle your hands or anything yet? Right? It's not excruciating yet? Well, good. Because it's going to become that way right now. Would you please write down the names of 3 creative monsters? And does anybody have any difficulty grasping what a creative monster might be? Yes? God bless you. Creative monsters are people who, well, the shorthand for it would be that they are WBs, wet blankets, okay? They are people who greet fledgling work with stiletto criticism that's unfair. They are people who wet blanket your dreams. They are people who say, I want to do one other thing. You can probably close your eyes and do this, or we could all just leap. How many people in this room have ever been accused of plagiarizing? Could we have a show of hands? At least a third of us, it looks like. Maybe more. Okay. One of the things that happens to gifted people is that when they turn in a piece of work, this happens to you when you're 7 years old, and your teacher says, Richard, this is a wonderful piece of work. Did someone help you with this? I mean, how many people have had at least that version of being accused? Look at the hands on this, okay? Do you know what that does? Do you know what we're talking about here is that the part of you that creates, and I mean, how many people, this we should get every hand in the room, how many people are sick of hearing about inner child, you know? However, the part of you that creates is, in fact, a very vulnerable, young, festive part of you. And in the same way that children can be very easily shamed, your creative part can be very easily shamed. So what I want you to do is write down the names of 3 times that somebody really shamed you around your creativity, whether it was in drawing, in music, in writing, whether it was in drama, whether it was in movement arts. Did I say music yet? Right? All right, so in any of the arts, just write down the names of 3 people. This should take us about 2 seconds. Okay, underneath that, draw a little line. And I'd like you to write down the names of 3 people who championed your creativity. For example, in my story, my best friend when I was little thought I had a nice voice. You know, Lenny thought I had a good singing voice. I've always remembered this. It's 40 years later, and I still remember Lenny saying, "You sing really good," you know. So please put down 3 creative champions. Thank you. Now I want you to make clusters of 4 right where you're seated, and I want you to pick the worst of your monster stories, and we're going to take 10 minutes for this. Each of you tell one of your monster stories. So we have 10 minutes. Please make clusters of 4 right where you are. Move your chairs so you can do it. Please move your chairs into clusters of 4. Ole, ole, Humphrey. want to double check something. Is everyone able to see the woman who's signing? Can you guys, is the sight line clear enough for you to be able to see her? Or do we need her to be up higher? Okay. Great. Okay. I'm going to read you something, these are called the Sacred Circle Rules. They're at the back of The Artist's Way. And they are intended to combat some of the toxic notions that we've got. Among them, it's too crowded at the top, and creativity requires that you be cutthroat. How many of you have ever found yourself thinking something along those lines, right? Ready? 1, creativity flourishes in a place of safety and acceptance. 2, creativity grows among friends and withers among enemies. One of the things that I think is particularly toxic is when we are involved in situations where beginning work is critiqued with that sort of stiletto precision that singles out the weak spots of the work without drawing forward the strengths of the work. Okay? So creativity grows among friends, withers among enemies. All creative ideas are children who deserve our protection. Okay? That, some of you may, why don't you think of them as little brothers and sisters who deserve your protection? But what we're talking about here is that if you are manifesting a piece of work, if you're in the beginning stages on a piece of work, you need to be exceedingly careful about who you show this work to. You need to be very careful. If you are a newly unblocked writer and you mail your morning pages to a friend of yours who is also a blocked writer, this is a true story. This is actually what happened to my partner, Mark Bryan. He blithely mailed off a set of his pages to a very good old friend who wrote back and said, "You're not Hemingway." Okay, he didn't write again for 3 months. Another friend of mine, who the book is dedicated to, is a writer who sent his first novel off to an agent. It was one of those pay-or-play agents. You pay them $100 and they tell you what they think. And this fellow wrote back and said, "I don't know how to fix this book. Half of it's great, half of it's not." My friend put the novel in a drawer and never showed it to anyone again. One of the things that happens to us with putting out work is that unless and until we are able to develop a strong enough inner core, we become so easily discouraged. We have such a difficult time discerning what is accurate criticism and what is often misplaced envy, that we tend to sabotage our work rather than get a second opinion. Okay? Most of us don't think, "Oh, well, that's just his opinion." We think, "I want to kill you." And then we think, "No, I really want to kill myself for being vulnerable enough to show you the work, for putting 3 years into this terrible piece of work, blah, blah, blah." Okay? So when you are talking about recovering your creativity, by which I mean going back, brushing aside, working through, excavating all of the wreckage that has, for most of us, been layered onto it by our creative monsters and simply by our life experience in this society, okay? You have to recover the amount of ground you have drifted away from your original creative self. And when you get back there and you start to do some work, You need to begin to construct, and this is why I'm happy to be talking at a school. Ed, whom the book is dedicated to, went to Georgetown with me. Gerard, who is another one of my beloved friends and someone to whom I safely show work, also went to school with me. Creativity occurs in clusters. Okay? Success is born in clusters. One of our ideas about creativity is that artists are loners. Now, we have got nothing to support this very accurately historically. I mean, take a look at the Impressionists. What did they paint? Going to lunch with each other. And when we talk about the Bloomsbury group, they were hanging out with each other. Same thing is true about Paris, okay? Hemingway, Gertrude Stein. These people formed creative clusters. To jump ahead a little bit, we just had last week 2 movies open. Age of Innocence opened wide, and so did De Niro's first directed film. And this is a good example, and an example that's sort of close in for me. My first husband is Marty Scorsese, and he and I have a daughter together. And my early screenwriting work was involved with Marty.